Sonic female. Sonic. Sonic female. Sonic. Sonic. Sonic female. You're listening to Sonic Female Podcast with Justine Blazer. Today's show is brought to you by The Producer Outfits, exclusive clothing brand for music producers. Show the world who you are. Check them out on social media at The Producer Outfits. On today's show, we have an amazing guest. She is a womanist, an entrepreneur, an author, an artist manager, and she works at Universal Music Publishing. She just released her very first book called Surviving Your 20s, available now on Amazon.com. The music mogul, Kim Ortiz. How are you today?
I am excellent. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for being on the show. So Kim is multi-title. So you are an artist, you're an artist manager, artist development. You work at Universal Music Publishing here in Nashville. You're a songwriter, you're a singer, you are like a mogul. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on the show today, because in a town of country music such as Nashville, I'm really interested to kind of hear your journey, your path from being from Kentucky. You were in Memphis for a while. Now you're obviously here in Nashville working in the music industry. You're wearing a lot of different hats. So I just want to kind of talk about kind of where you began. So you said that you grew up in Kentucky. What part of Kentucky are you from?
Yeah, so I ping-ponged around quite a bit. So I actually moved to Kentucky right in the middle of my 10th grade year. I moved to Louisville. Prior to that, I was in North Carolina for 10 years. Been bouncing around a little bit. But yeah, I graduated high school from Louisville, Kentucky.
When did you move to Nashville? When did you know that this is the town that you wanted to be in? I mean, you could be in LA, you could be in Atlanta, you could be in New York, you could be in a lot of different major markets. Why Nashville? Why now? What made you make that decision?
Yeah, so I think it's so interesting because I always like to say Nashville found me. I didn't necessarily find Nashville. Mm-hmm. My family is from Memphis, Tennessee. So I had been coming through Nashville my whole life, to get to Memphis. But Nashville was never on my radar necessarily. But I knew that I always wanted to work in the music industry. So when I graduated from high school, it was more so about, okay, what college can I go to that's going to offer me a music business program? And so somehow someone mentioned Middle Tennessee State, which is in Murfreesboro, right outside of Nashville, to me. And that's how I ended up here. I moved here in 2009 to start going to college and just ended up staying here.
So you studied abroad. That's actually how I met you. For those of you that don't know, I am a music producer and I also do audio engineering and mixing. So you came to me a while back with a track that you had done over in Spain. It's called We Are One, which is going to be your upcoming single, which you're going to be launching. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But you came to me with that and was like, hey, I want you to mix this down. I didn't know you that well, but I got intrigued about your story. Your voice is amazing. Your writing, and you kind of wanted to bring that sort of nostalgic vibe to kind of modern day. And the song is such a powerful message. So tell me about your journey studying abroad in Spain and how that song kind of came to surface and why you wanted to release that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess for everyone who doesn't know how I ended up in Spain, so I was looking for a master's program and I had done a study abroad in undergrad, loved being out the country, and I had a friend of mine who studied at Berklee College of Music. They had a master's program at their campus in Valencia, Spain, so I applied, and that's how I ended up in Spain for a year, was attending grad school there with Berklee, and I graduated with my master's last summer. But while I was there, I just got so inspired, not only because for the first time in a very long time, I'm a band nerd, so I was in band my whole life. Shout out to all the clarinet players.
What did you play?
Clarinet. It was beautiful, just being in a school where there were just so many musicians. It was quite natural for me to find inspiration, just to get out of the States. And then with just the climate politically, socially, that everything was happening in the States. And I it was hard for me being abroad, and I'm looking at the news and I'm seeing all of these different things that are happening back home, that were out of my control. It was just like so much death, so much turmoil, so much hatred. And this was right around the time of Black History Month. It was February, and one of my classmates was doing like a Black History program. And I think a couple weeks before that, I had been listening to Sam Cooke. He's one of my favorite artists. So I was listening.
Oh yeah, love that.
Gotta love Sam Cooke. I was listening to Chain Gang, 4 or 5 days straight. And I just started writing. And I wanted to bring back that 50s kind of doo-wop style because that's what I grew up listening to. And so that's how the song We Are One came about. I wanted it to have a powerful message. I wanted it to have a singable chorus that would get stuck in your head, that people can sing. Just the concept of we are one. We're not really that different. Let's put, all of the aesthetic differences aside and just really come together and love each other. And so that's basically how that song came about.
So you had a live band. I remember receiving the session, and there was just like a lot of tracks in that session. So was that all done kind of like one take, just kind of front to back, or did you guys multi-track that or do some different? Was that like a lengthy process? Explain the way that was done.
Yeah, so I would say it was a kind of lengthy because at the time that I wrote the song, I had no intentions of recording it. I had no intentions of releasing it. If anybody knows me, I'm very shy about all the songs that I've written, which is why I'm on the artist manager front and not the artist front. So after I wrote the song, we actually performed it at that Black History program, and the reception of the song was just so great. The musicians who were involved and the background singers were just like, "Hey, do you plan on recording this?" So by the time we were able to book studio time, we had to pretty much bang it out in one day. Thankfully, Chavez, who was one of the producers, worked in the studio. So the first thing that we did is laid all the instrument parts. So it was a lot of multi-tracking. Like you mentioned, it was a lot of tracks. We did scratch vocals, a lot of vocal takes that you saw. And then we went back and kind of cleaned up what we could in the short amount of time that we had.
Yeah. So where did you guys track that in Spain? Was it like at actual studio or was it another facility? Where was that at?
It was actually on Berkeley's campus. So Berkeley had quite a few studios on their campus for their production courses. They had a beautiful film for their film scoring. They had a beautiful sound stage for their film scoring class. So that's where they could fit a full orchestra in there to basically record a score for a film. So that's actually the studio that we recorded in.
Okay. Well, let's take a listen to it.
We are one.
So we just listened to We Are One. That is a little clip. That's your upcoming single. So when exactly are you releasing that? What's your plans for that song?
Yeah, so my plan as of now is to release it in June. June, for those that don't know, there's a celebration called Juneteenth, which I believe happens right around the 13th. So that's actually for the African diaspora. That's when we celebrate our Independence Day. And so it's a really important holiday for African Americans because it basically is our celebration of independence. It goes all the way back to slavery. When the slaves were emancipated, June is when they actually celebrated their emancipation versus the 4th of July. So I wanted to kind of keep that theme going since it was written right around Black History Month. I was thinking Juneteenth could be the perfect time. to release it. So that is the goal right now, and I'm hoping that it will be on all platforms digitally.
That's great. I love that so much. And I think that song, the inspiration message with it, I think it pertains not just to what you were just talking about, but anyone that has had seen adversities, and you being a female as well as myself, we know sometimes the challenges we face working, especially in the music industry. So I think not only is it, a cultural or a race issue, but it's also comes down to just being, a female working, in a male dominated business. So I think that message is super strong in that aspect as well.
Oh, absolutely. When I wrote it, it definitely wasn't just the plight of African Americans. It was and it still is for anyone, as you mentioned, who has ever felt marginalized, whether that's in the LGBTQ community, whether that's being a woman, whether that's racially. It's definitely a song that calls out bigotry in any form. So it's definitely for everyone, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about kind of who inspired you as a vocalist. I know you mentioned that you played the clarinet and you were in the band world for a bit. When did you just know and knew that singing was something that you were good at and that you wanted to pursue? And who were like some of you mentioned Sam Cooke, but there were probably some others that maybe inspired you to get to this point.
Yeah, you know what? The funny thing is, I don't even consider myself a vocalist necessarily. And I know that sounds so weird. But I mean, I grew up singing in church. So I would say my early inspiration in terms of vocalists would be gospel singers, the Clark sisters, Yolanda Adams, Aretha Franklin, absolutely, Whitney Houston.
Yes.
Just to name a few. But, even outside of that, extremely inspired by James Brown, Sam Cooke, Isaac Hayes. So the list goes on and on and on. I think for me, I'm just attracted to good music. I'm attracted to substance. I love a good funky groove. Maybe that's the Memphis inside of me. That whole Stax museum era is definitely in my blood. It's in my DNA. So I think that it shifted from me being younger. I used to sing in a neo-soul trio called Mocha Latte throughout college, and actually the male singer from that group is who I manage, Jay Buck. So I manage him full time now. When we broke up, he went solo.
Yeah, that was my next question, because you wear so many hats and you are a music manager. So talk about how you became a music manager and what was sort of your journey to become in managing a few different artists, and kind of what are your roles? What are you expected to do, and why music management was something that you wanted to do?
In terms of management, I don't know if it was ever something that I always said I wanted to do. I think it was something that I fell into, even by mistake, but I just ended up loving it so much that I realized that it was something that I was good at, and it was something that I could see myself doing for quite a while. So as I mentioned, Jay Buck was the male singer in our trio, and when we broke up, there was a period where none of us were really focused on music because life things were happening, with all of us. And so I remember he ended up moving back to Memphis, and kind of when he made the decision that he wanted to pursue music full time, I know that he ended up calling me, and he actually came down to meet with me in Murfreesboro and said, "Hey, listen, I have an album that I'm releasing. I could really use your help." That was in 2015. And so it's now 2019. We're about 3 albums in. He's getting ready to release his 3rd album. And so we're going on an international tour next week. And I think that if for anyone who's interested in being an artist manager, or if you're an artist searching for an artist manager, I think the most important thing is the chemistry, because you always hear so often how many, artists are having issues with their management. And, there's sometimes some type of conflict where there's a difference of opinion. But I think it's important to kind of have an understanding of chemistry and respect, and to really know what the artist wants before going into it, and what you want as a manager before choosing to pursue that as a career.
Yeah. So as an artist, let's say someone's listening to this and they're, more on the newer side or the greener side. Do you recommend them trying to align themselves with a manager right away? Or is this something that they should kind of discover more organically? Maybe they sort of, test the waters more on their own, and then they pursue a management contract. What would be your advice for a newer artist in terms of trying to get that artist manager dynamic happening?
I think it's very important as an artist to establish what you want as an artist. What are your goals? And what is it that you want your manager to, what services do you want your manager to provide? I had a conversation with a friend of mine who works for 92Q about this a while ago. And I think that there's a misconception that some artists, especially if you're independent, I understand it's incredibly difficult position to be in when you don't have that financial support that major labels or even independent labels could offer when you're doing everything completely independent. You know, you want that support, and so often you think a manager can make certain things happen for you. And sometimes that's the case if you have a management deal with a manager who's been in the industry for a very long time and has those pre-established connections. But if you're a new artist and you're not as established, then really before you need a manager, I think you have to prove that you can sort of manage yourself, because a manager has to have something to manage. And I know that sounds harsh and I don't mean it that way, but I've had a few artists reach out to me who are brand new, and I think that they're doing great, but it's the little things, like they don't have social media, and I know social media is like a catch-22. It's a necessary evil in my opinion, but you have to make yourself visible, and there's no visibility there. They don't have any music that they've released, so it's literally starting from scratch. And when a manager is coming into the picture with the artist who started from scratch, I think there has to be a common ground where each party knows what they're getting into is not going to be financially lucrative for either party. So I think communication is the biggest key there, and patience. For sure.
Mm-hmm. What would be a time frame that you would sort of allow yourself to develop an artist, and when is it just not working out anymore and you just kind of know that we need to go separate ways?
As I mentioned, I think every manager has their own style. Every artist manager is different, but specifically for me, before I agreed to manage an artist, I always, if the artist doesn't have any experience performing, that's the route that I kind of go in terms of artist development. We sit down, we have a meeting, and I say, okay, listen, I think you have great potential, but it's not about what I think necessarily. But again, it goes back to what do you want? If you tell me, hey, Kim, I want to tour. I want to be a touring artist. Okay, great. So now we have a starting point. I'm going to book some shows. I book my own shows, so that way I have control over who gets the opportunity. Because what I realize is being in Nashville, it's especially when you're doing something outside of country music, it's a little difficult if you're a brand new artist to try to get venues to, want to book you. Especially if you're right. doing hip hop or R&B or even something outside of urban music that's not strictly country. It's still very difficult.
Yeah. I mean, we had a pop artist on the show not too long ago, and she's literally said the same thing. So, I mean, anything other than country, I find it's somewhat more of an obstacle than versus other markets like Atlanta, Detroit, Boston, New York, Austin, LA. But yeah, so do you seek in a regional aspect first, or do you sort of just shoot for this sort of national thing? Is it really based on the artist's fan base? I mean, how are you making those decisions?
I think the best thing for me is I want to, in terms of the development structure, it's what kind of fan base do you have here at home? That's where we start. If we can make you as visible, I don't care about your Facebook, I don't care about your Twitter, I don't care about your Instagram, because for me, those aren't really tangible numbers. I know that
that's so true.
Other entities put a lot of pressure on people to have, 10K plus followers. I don't care about that because that means nothing. Those aren't people we can reach out and touch. What my goal is, let's get you in front of as many people as possible that you can actually reach out and touch, make an actual connection with them. And then once we establish that relationship, that's all the music industry is. It's a relationship-based industry, which is why it's so small. So if you can reach out and touch the people, then I think, we're on the right path, if that's what you want to do in terms of being a working musician or a working artist, or do you want a record deal? Either way it goes, it has to start with visibility.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you that. You said record deal. I mean, is that something that you're actively pursuing, is, setting up meetings for your artists? Are they not there yet? What is the process? And I'm just curious, do you seek at the labels in Nashville, or are you seeking, the New York or LA or Atlanta land offices if they're hip hop or pop or R&B?
For J Bus specifically, the thing is he's not interested. I'm not going to say he's not interested, but having a major record deal for him right now was not his goal. His goal was to be a touring act. And so that's what we've been working towards. And so that's what we are doing. Now, I think that it all goes hand in hand. We've had interest from producers and some A&R from labels. Not this market in Nashville, I can say, is not his market. The interest that we've had has come from New York, Atlanta, LA. And so if he decides that that's something that he wants to do, then, we'll pursue that. But as of now, he has not expressed interest in having a record deal at this very moment, but that could change.
Okay. What would be one thing that you would be a platform that keeps you motivated in addition to the music industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad that you asked because what has always been and still is my long-term goal, I'm very passionate about education and about training, and specifically with youth, especially youth that come from rough areas. I want to make sure that they have a platform where they're able to get training. So my goal is to, and this is something that's in the works, is to create a vocational program that infuses art, that infuses music, but also it infuses basic life skills, such as finances, how to manage your money, how to invest, while you're young, how does the economy work, basically different practical skills that young people can take and use that to develop into careers. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to college. But I definitely do believe that you do need some type of formal training. So education is the biggest thing for me. I know that while I was in Spain, I did volunteer work for Musicians Without Borders. Now I know that their mission is a little different, but it all goes hand in hand back to education. The good thing about Musicians Without Borders is they do a lot of work with refugees and asylum. So I kind of want to incorporate that aspect with youth who are refugees and who are seeking asylum, and then bring in the education aspect as well. So
I love that. That is something that is so incredible. I wish I had that growing up. Is that something that you're wanting to do as like an after school program, or are you actually wanting to go into schools as a sort of an additional class, or is it after school, or are you going to like the local community centers and kind of working on something with them? What's your vision for that?
Yeah, so right now I'm in a process of drafting up a nonprofit proposal for what I wanted to start as the infrastructure right now. I already have the name for it. It's just the proposal is such a lengthy process to do a nonprofit. But basically, I want to start out getting involved with the Pencil program. So with Pencil, basically, you're able to go into different schools. I think every state has one, but I know specifically with Nashville, you can go into schools that are in more of the rougher areas, and you can offer students job placements. So basically, that's how I would want to structure it, is have students come and basically volunteer with the program. And then eventually I want it to turn into a full-blown school. So it'll actually be a vocational school. So that's the long-term goal. That's like 15 years away. But short-term goal, I want to have my own building. And I just want it to be a safe place for students of any origin, of any nationality, of any sexual orientation. I just want it to be a safe place where you can come, you can learn. We'll do master classes, we'll offer rehabilitation for refugees. It's just going to be a safe place all the way around where you can come, listen to music,
that's fantastic,
paint, whatever you want to do, but you'll feel safe there. So, and we'll again infuse the education. So that's the short-term goal.
An idea could be with this, perhaps, you mentioned music education, but maybe there's, a live audio class or a recording class, or maybe there is a music management class, or, we want to think bigger because when I was growing up, I always looked when they said, what do you want to be when you grew up? And I always knew I wanted to be like a singer, entertainment, and like literally you had to check the box off, and there was never that box, and not every kid wants to grow up and be a dentist or a doctor or something like that. And I feel like our society somewhat, shames us a little little bit into if you're not conventional like that. So in addition to the conventional jobs, is that something else that you want to introduce to these kids? You know, something a little bit left of center. You don't have to do the conventional jobs.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually where we're starting. So when I say education, I don't mean like the basic, if you want to be a doctor, I mean the unconventional. I know that I was told by a lot of people who didn't really understand what music business was. Oh, how are you going to make money? That's not practical. I've been told that pretty much my whole life. How are you going to make money with that? But like you, what I wish I would have known, I mean, when you're going to these, when I was in high school and we went to different colleges and, we had career day and people came in to talk to us about their career. It was never someone who was in A&R. It was never someone who was in the art realm necessarily. It was always like, oh, a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, a fireman, a policeman. And that's great. But, like you mentioned, for students who want to go, do something different that is more artistic or more vocational, whether it's a mechanic, whether it's a cosmetologist. Those are all certifications and trades that you can use, and be successful, even if it's not the conventional, you go to college for 4 years route.
Yeah, that's great. You have a book that you published. It's called Surviving Your 20s. That's quite profound. I love that. What is the book about? How did you get a book published and why did you want to do that?
Yeah, so, God, it's taken me 4 years to write this book. I never imagined it would take that long when I started writing it. But I had 2 years of writer's block. And I think I wrote the book for me. And I know that sounds probably cliche, but when I was transitioning from a teenager into adulthood, I didn't have a book or anything to say, to warn me and say, hey girl, watch out for this. When your parents are trying to tell you, oh, you don't want to be an adult yet, I didn't pay attention to my parents. I'm like, what do you know? Like as a teenager, you're not really ingesting what they're trying to tell you until you're thrusted into adulthood. So for me, I feel like I was jolted into being responsible, having like real bills come and, real adult situations happen, and I wasn't prepared for them. I wasn't mentally, I should say, prepared for them. So Surviving Your 20s is a motivational book. It's a self-help book. I wanted it to be short. It's only 80 pages, because I wanted to go straight to the point. There's different exercises that I invite the reader to do. I want it to be very much so like your own personal journal, like your own reflection, where you can write in it, you can highlight in it. I just want it to be a very handy resource for you. It has a whole chapter dedicated to affirmations that you can say to yourself, or you can write them down. Rip the page out if you want, leave it somewhere where you can see it every day. So it's just a motivational book. For any adult. It's not just for someone in their 20s. My dad, I gave him a proof of it this weekend, and he's 60 something and loved it. He was like, I don't think this is just for 20-year-olds. Like, you were speaking to me too, which made me feel great. So it'll be available on Amazon exclusively right now as a printable version, and then I will release a Kindle/ebook version in June. But in May, it'll be available within the next 2 weeks on Amazon. And you can buy it.
That's so awesome. So how did you get hooked up with like a book publisher, and what was that process? I know you said it took like 4 years, and sort of the end of the writing process to the point where you're at right now. Was that a hard process to get out on Amazon?
Yeah, so I'm actually self-publishing, which is why it's coming through Amazon. Amazon, there's several different self-publisher options you can do. BookBaby is one of them. I just chose to go directly through Amazon, just to skip the middleman. But it's a very long process. As I mentioned, I had like 2 years of writer's block where I just didn't know what to say. And while I was in Spain, I finished it, or what I thought I had finished it, and it was roughly a little over 100 pages long. And when I started reading it to do the first edit process, I realized like, oh my God, this is redundant. So I think the most grueling part was editing it and making sure that it was something that was readable, it was enjoyable, it wasn't redundant, doesn't have grammatical errors. So that's why it's taken so long. But the book cover, one of my very good friends, his name is Zabion Hart. He's an amazing graphic designer. He's been doing J-Book's album covers for years, and he had never done a book cover before. So I trusted him immensely with the task. I said, hey, here's the title. Here's kind of what I have in my head. You take it and run with it. And he did an incredible job on my book cover. So I hope you all enjoy it.
Okay, so lastly, let's talk about your most recent venture of working at Universal Music Group, which is just badass, here in Nashville. How has that experience been for you? I know you just got the job recently, because I remember kind of following your Facebook posts. How have you been adjusting to that? What are your roles, and how do you feel like that's benefiting you?
I'm getting someone now. But no, I mean, Universal is a dream, honestly, in terms of working at a major. Universal, they're such an amazing company. I was welcomed with open arms. I like being in a company where it feels like a family, and that's how it feels. Especially working on the publishing side, where it's more tedious, I would say. And it's so funny because a lot of my friends are like, oh, publishing isn't sexy. But I'm like, you learn so much doing admin and on the publishing side, because that's really the lifeline, I would say, of the music industry. That's where most artists receive their money. It's how you get paid. Especially if you're a songwriter, publishing is the most important thing for you. So that's where I fit in. I do a lot in terms of being on the copyright end. So a lot of royalty processing, making sure that songs are loaded correctly, that artists are able to get paid and paid on time. So yeah, it's been a blast, honestly. I've only been there, I think I just hit my 1 month anniversary. It's great. I'm loving every single bit of it. So I'm really happy to be there.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, it could turn into something where it could lead to more roles and maybe, A&R or development, or, do you see that as a potential opportunity, like if you continue, in that realm? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's so funny because something that I've always had my eye on, I love A&R. I've always loved, discovering new talent. I actually think that's where one of my talent lies, is being able to discover the diamond in the roughs. But something that I'm very interested in is licensing and being a music supervisor. So that's something that's in my view right now, is just working hard to become a music supervisor. I want to see my name, on those credits at the end. But more importantly, it's just being able to see a film come together with the choices that you're able to make in terms of music, because, that's the backbone of any film. A lot of people discover songs from the movies that they watch. I know I've discovered a lot of songs just from being a movie fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And it's funny because a lot of these movies are bringing back some of these older songs, and like, Ozark, for example. I don't know if you've watched the series on Netflix, but like the last episode of season 2, I believe, they had Brandy, You're a Fine Girl, which is like a song from the 70s. And like now that song is big again because by Looking Glass, and that's just like one of many, many examples. Is that something that you handle? I mean, what's the process if an artist comes in and is like, hey, I want to license this song? And I mean, what would you recommend? Like, what's the proper chain of command, so to speak, for something like that?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So pretty much how that process works, I guess there's several different third-party production groups that you can go for. I know when we were getting songs, J-Buck songs licensed for television, we were working with a company called Tinderbox Music out of Minnesota. And basically what they did is they came and said, hey, because Buck has his own publishing company, his own publishing entity, we're not signed to a major publisher because that's not the way we wanted it. We wanted him to be able to retain his own royalties. We basically just outsourced to third party product. Well, they found us really. And because they had the connections, we were able to get songs licensed like on MTV, VH1, on Network Discovery. But basically they took over they did the essential job as a publisher, but they're not our publisher. So they just took basically an admin fee. So that's one area that you can do. If you're an independent artist, I know that several different aggregators like CD Baby, for example, or TuneCore have options where they will basically exploit your music for licensing, for commercials, for film, for television. They will act as a publisher, but in the admin capacity. So basically with that, the difference is the publisher will actually own a percentage of your music, whereas if you have an admin deal, you retain all of your copyright ownership, but whoever is administrating that or facilitating that deal for you will just take a small percentage, but they won't own your copyright. It's really, really, really hard for an artist to have direct access to a music supervisor. They're like almost impossible. I'm not gonna say they're impossible, but like, unless you're signed to a major publisher, they're very hard to reach out to. What I would suggest is going to conferences. That's how I met a lot of music supervisors, which is being visible at these different music conferences.
I was going to ask you about that because I know that they have the sync licensing conference every year. I want to say it's in Florida. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? It's, I don't even know the name of it, but there's like a couple different ones where you can go and basically do just that. It's a conference where you meet a bunch of, sync licensing type people in hopes of the right contact to get you in front for placement. Are you familiar with that, or is there one that you recommend?
I'm not familiar with the specific one that you're talking about. I want to say I don't know the name of it per se, but I've had people tell me that they've attended conferences like that, such as like AIM too. I know is one of them. But what I would suggest is there's one that happens in Nashville. If you're right here in Nashville, every summer, typically in August, CD Baby has their DIY musician conference. I would highly suggest that conference because you never know who you can meet there. I know, for example, last year we went and Bob Boylan was there, who does Tiny Desk with NPR. He was there. They had a lot of people from like Fox, from Lionsgate, who are all in the licensing, HBO licensing industry, who are there that you're able to, get their business card, talk to. I would suggest those. If you're overseas, a good one would definitely be Madame, which takes place in the south of France. It's quite pricey, so I would only suggest that if you're already in Europe.
I remember seeing the DIY conference, and I did not attend, but I wish I would have. But I know that they hold them every year. And there's also like festivals like South by Southwest. I hear that that's a good opportunity for any of those type of events, are good. But yeah, as many of those kind of things that you can go to, you're going to get something from.
What I've been told from music supervisors is there's certain things that you can do. Again, visibility is honestly the best thing that you could ever do, is make your music available and make it easy to get to. Music supervisors don't prefer that you send them like tracks to download. They don't tend to like things to download. So having your music on something like SoundCloud, for example, is a good idea, because I've had a lot of them ask me to send them SoundCloud links or a Spotify link instead, and then if they're interested, then they'll give you instructions on how to proceed, which is always best. You always want to make sure that you send them the information the way that they ask for it, just to make it easier on them. But also, something that also helps is if you're a songwriter and you own the song, which means there's no samples on it, it's 100% original, you have a much better chance too of a song being licensed if you're a brand new artist, because there's less middlemen, there's less hoops that music supervisors have to jump through. They have to deal with one publisher instead of 12 if you're someone that has multiple songwriters on your project. So those are just little tips that have come to me directly from music supervisors. But I would say attend as many conferences as you can. Make sure your music is easy to find. And if you come into contact with someone, make a genuine connection. You can find music supervisor emails sometimes, like on different websites. I would say if you're getting emails from something like Songtrader, I know with Book, he gets emails all the time from like music supervisor, third party or licensing companies. Some of them are legit, most of them are not. So I would say just make sure you do an extensive vetting process to make sure you're not just, uploading your music or sending your music to who knows where.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. As we kind of wrap this up, what is sort of your next move? What are you looking to do next?
So now the goal is to keep my eye focused on music supervision so I can be in that position to give more independent artists an opportunity, because I think that's extremely important. I want to start back throwing shows. I'm going on tour next week, so the whole month of May is a little hectic, but once I get back, I want to start back throwing concerts, which I've been doing in Nashville. So that's something on my agenda. And then just making sure I get this nonprofit up and running. Those are the main three things that I want to continue doing. I don't necessarily want to take on any new projects as of yet until I get those grounded, but we'll see what comes my way.
Absolutely. Where can everybody find you and find your music? What are some social media links?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. On Instagram, I am P like Paul, M like Mary _MGMT. So that's basically an abbreviation for my company, Prospective Media Management. So that's PM _MGMT. On Facebook, you can find me at Prospective Media Management. And same with my website, prospectivemgmt.com. So I'm on 3 different platforms there. Shoot me an email if you're an independent artist, you want me to take a listen to your song, you want to perform, you live in Nashville, just shoot me an email.
There you go. It sounds like a good opportunity. Check her out and hit her up. Thank you so much. That is our episode today with Kim Ortiz, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is J Buck, Love Me Back on Sonic Female.
I just want you to love me back. And I just need you to have my back. Oh, and I wanna build a house for you. There's so many things that we could do. You're the kind of woman that makes a man wanna change. Hey, I just want you to love me back. I've been telling everybody about you, and I don't do that. Oh, and even when you get on my nerves, that only makes me love you more, girl. There's no other place in this world that I'd rather be. Hey, I just want you to love me back. And when I get you, our love will be magic. Oh, and all the wise men will try to find the answers and the reason why we made a love that will stand the test of time. I just wanna buy you a ring, 'cause you've got the kind of love that brings me to my knees. And if it's alright in God's eyes, I'll love you till the day that I die. And in the next life, just to make up for lost time.